Jack Morrison stared at the message on his screen for the third time. The words made no sense. Every human ship in the galaxy was to stop what they were doing right now and return to Earth. No questions asked. No delays allowed. No exceptions given. He sat in the captain's chair of the cargo ship Blue Harbor, floating in space near the Zentari mining colonies. His crew of 12 humans had been loading rare crystals for the past 6 hours. The Zentari workers were still, moving containers into his ship's hold. Everything was normal until this message arrived. The communication came through the most secure human channels. Only top military commanders and government officials could send messages like this. Jack had never seen anything like it in his 20 years of space travel. The message was short and simple. All humans were to leave immediately. Return to Sol system. Speak to no one. Explain nothing. "Captain, what's wrong?" asked his first officer, Pete Walsh. The young man had noticed Jack's worried face. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Jack closed the message screen quickly. He looked around the bridge at his crew. These people trusted him. They had families on different worlds. Some had alien friends and business partners. How could he tell them they had to abandon everything without knowing why? "Change of plans," Jack said slowly. "We're heading home, right now." "Home?" Pete looked confused. "But we haven't finished loading. The Zentari are expecting us to deliver these crystals. To the Corvin system, we have contracts." "Contracts are canceled," Jack said. He tried to keep his voice steady. "Send a message to the Zentari dockmaster. Tell them we have an emergency and must leave immediately." His communications officer, Lisa Park, turned in her chair. "What kind of emergency, Captain? Should I call for medical help or rescue ships?" "No," Jack said quickly. "Just tell them we have to go. Don't give details." The bridge fell silent. Jack's crew had worked together for 5 years. They knew each other well. They could tell when something was seriously wrong. But they also knew Jack Morrison was a good captain who had never led them into danger. Lisa sent the message to the Zentari Dockmaster. The reply came back within minutes. The alien voice sounded worried and confused through the translator. "Blue Harbor, this is Dockmaster Zektar. Your departure seems very sudden. Is there anything we can do to help? Your crew has always been professional and reliable. We do not understand this emergency." Jack took the communication himself. "Dockmaster Zektar, thank you for your concern. We appreciate our long partnership. Unfortunately, we must leave immediately. Please arrange for our cargo containers to be removed from the ship. But Captain Morrison, we have been friends for many years. Your ship has carried our crystals safely across the galaxy. If something is wrong, perhaps we can assist you." The worry in the alien's voice made Jack feel sick. The Zentari had always treated human crews fairly. They paid well and on time. They shared meals and stories during long loading periods. Many humans considered them close friends. "I'm sorry, Zektar," Jack said. "This is something we must handle alone." He cut the communication before the dockmaster could respond. The silence on the bridge was thick and uncomfortable. Jack's crew stared at him with questions in their eyes, but he couldn't give them answers. He didn't have. "Take us out of dock," Jack ordered his pilot, Ben Carter. "Set course for Earth, maximum speed." As the Blue Harbor pulled away from the mining station, Jack watched the Zentari workers through his window. They stood on the loading platform, their long arms hanging at their sides. Even through their alien faces, he could see confusion and hurt. They had been loading containers just minutes ago, laughing and working alongside human crew members. Now they watched their friends leave without explanation. Similar scenes were happening across the galaxy. On the diplomatic station orbiting Kepler Prime, Ambassador Kyle Turner walked out of peace talks between the Vegan Alliance and the Arcturus Republic. The two groups had been arguing about trading rights for 3 months. Kyle had spent weeks building trust between them. They were close to reaching an agreement. "Ambassador Turner, where are you going?" asked Chancellor Vex from the Vegan delegation. "We still have many issues to discuss," Kyle stopped at the meeting room door. He had worked with these beings for 2 years. They respected his judgment and trusted his advice. Many conflicts had been solved because Kyle knew how to find solutions that worked for everyone. "I'm sorry," Kyle said. "I have to leave." "Leave?" The Arcturus representative, Director Thane, stood up quickly. "But we are so close to an agreement. Your people have been our mediators for decades. You cannot abandon us now." Kyle wanted to explain, but the orders were clear. No explanations, no farewells. Just leave immediately. He walked out of the room without another word. Behind him, he could hear angry voices rising as the two alien groups began arguing again without human mediation. Across the station, other human diplomats were doing the same thing. Trade negotiations were abandoned halfway through. Cultural exchange programs were left without directors. Translation services stopped working. Within 2 hours, every human on the diplomatic station had boarded ships heading for Earth. In the military sector, Admiral Lisa Hayes received the same message aboard her flagship, the Liberty. Her fleet of 30 ships protected the busy trade, routes between the core worlds and the frontier systems. Pirates and raiders had learned to avoid areas where human patrol ships operated. "Admiral, we're receiving distress calls from 3 merchant vessels," reported her communications officer, Danny Brooks. "Looks like the Crimson Fleet is attacking Convoy 7 Alpha near the Neptune Nebula." Lisa stared at the tactical display. The merchant ships were calling for help, but she had her orders. All human military forces were to return to Sol system immediately. No exceptions. "Signal the fleet," Lisa said quietly. "All ships are to set course for Earth. Maximum speed." "Ma'am?" Danny looked shocked. "What about the convoy? They're under attack." "They'll have to handle it themselves." "But Admiral, those are civilian ships, families and cargo haulers. The pirates will destroy them." Lisa closed her eyes for a moment. In 30 years of military service, she had never abandoned people who needed help. The human fleet had a reputation for protecting everyone, not just humans. Alien species trusted them to keep the space lanes safe. "I have my orders, Lieutenant," she said. "Send the course change to all ships." The human fleet turned away from the battle and headed for Earth. Behind them, the merchant convoy fought alone against superior numbers. 3 ships were destroyed before the survivors could escape to hyperspace. On research stations, trading posts, and frontier colonies, the same scene played out hundreds of times. Humans packed quickly and left without explanations. Projects were abandoned. Partnerships ended. Friendships were broken without warning. Dr. Amanda Foster had been working on a cure for Zentari plague fever for 3 years. Her research station in the Helix Nebula was close to a breakthrough that could save millions of lives. When the message arrived, she deleted her files and prepared to leave. "Dr. Foster, you cannot go now," pleaded her Zentari research partner, Dr. Kexmore. "We are so close to finding the cure. My people are dying." Amanda looked at her friend with tears in her eyes. They had worked 18-hour days together, sharing knowledge and hope. The cure was maybe weeks away from completion. "I'm sorry, Kexmore," she whispered. "I have to go." She walked away from 3 years of work and a friend who needed her. The cure for Zentari plague fever remained undiscovered. Across the galaxy, humans were making the same impossible choice. Orders were orders, even when they made no sense. Even when they hurt people who trusted them. Even when they felt like betrayal. Within 72 hours, humanity had vanished from galactic civilization. They left behind empty offices half-finished, projects, and confused alien friends who couldn't understand what had gone wrong. The galaxy had grown used to human reliability and friendship. Now they faced an uncertain future alone. The Great Silence had begun, and nobody knew why. 3 months had passed since the humans disappeared, and the galaxy was beginning to crack. Chancellor Vextai of the Aldorian Republic stood before the emergency session of the Galactic Council, his four arms moving wildly as he spoke. The great assembly hall that had once buzzed with quiet confidence now echoed with angry voices and desperate pleas. "The situation grows worse each day," Vextai announced to the gathered representatives. "Without human mediators, old conflicts are returning. Trade has nearly stopped. Pirates attack our ships without fear." In the audience, Dock Master Zektar from the Zentari colonies shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He remembered Captain Morrison's sudden departure and the confusion that followed. The crystals meant for the Corvin system still sat in storage containers, growing more worthless each day as buyers found other sources or simply stopped buying altogether. The Zentari had always been miners and traders, not fighters or negotiators. They knew how to dig valuable minerals from asteroids and moons, but they had relied on human cargo ships to move their goods and human diplomats to solve disputes with customers. Without these services, their economy was failing fast. The Corvan. "Republic claims ownership of the entire Helios asteroid belt," Zektar said when called to speak. "They say humans were wrong to let us mine there. They want us gone immediately." Director Thane of the Arcturus Republic stood up quickly. "The Corvins are being unreasonable. Those asteroids have been shared peacefully for 40 years. Ambassador Turner helped create the original mining agreement." "Turner is gone," snapped General Voss of the Corvin military. "All humans are gone. Their agreements mean nothing now. The Helios belt belongs to us because it sits closer to our worlds." "Distance means nothing in space," Thane replied angrily. "The Zentari found those minerals first. They have the right to continue mining." "They have the right to nothing," Voss said. "Our ships will remove them if they do not leave willingly." Chancellor Vextai tried to restore order, but without human diplomatic skills, the argument only grew louder. The Zentari and Corvins had never learned to negotiate directly with each other. They had always relied on human mediators who understood both cultures and could find solutions that satisfied everyone. The economic problems were even worse than the political ones. Elena Rodriguez had managed the central trade hub for 8 years before the humans vanished. Her office had coordinated cargo shipments between 47 different species, tracking supply and demand across hundreds of star systems. She had known which worlds needed food, which planets produced excess goods, and how to balance trade so everyone benefited. Now the hub operated with a skeleton crew of confused aliens who barely understood the human-designed systems. Cargo ships arrived, at ports with no buyers for their goods. Planets that depended on imported food faced shortages. Currency exchange rates fluctuated wildly because no one knew how to manage the complex formulas Elena had used. Captain Sector of the Vegan Merchant Marine watched his cargo of medical supplies rot in a warehouse on Station Beta 7. The supplies were desperately needed on 3 different worlds, but the coordination network had broken down. He had no way to contact potential buyers, no system to arrange payment, and no guarantee that his ship would be safe during transport. "Before the humans left, I could call Elena Rodriguez, and she would solve any problem in hours," Sector told his crew. "Now I sit here for weeks with medicine going bad while people die on distant worlds." His navigator, a young Vegan named Pexmin, looked at the cargo manifests with confusion. "The human systems are too complicated. We cannot understand their trade algorithms or shipping schedules. Everything was designed for human minds. The breakdown in trade coordination affected every aspect of galactic life. Restaurant owners on the pleasure worlds could not get exotic ingredients. Manufacturers lacked raw materials for production. Even basic necessities like water purifiers and air recyclers became scarce as supply chains collapsed. The security situation was becoming dangerous. Captain Lisa Blake had commanded the human patrol ship Defender for 6 years, working closely with alien security forces to keep pirates and criminals under control. Her joint task force had included officers from 12 different species, But she had been the one who coordinated their efforts and shared intelligence between different law enforcement agencies. Without human coordination, the task force had fallen apart. Each species now operated alone, protecting only their own ships and stations. Communication between different security forces stopped almost completely. Pirates and smugglers quickly noticed the change and began operating more boldly. The Crimson Fleet, a notorious pirate organization that had been barely surviving under constant human pressure, suddenly found themselves with new opportunities. Their leader, a scarred Corvan named Grixtor, studied shipping schedules and patrol routes that were no longer coordinated or protected. "The humans kept us hiding in the Outer Rim for years," Grixtor told his captains during a strategy meeting. "Now they are gone and the galaxy is defenseless. Every alien security force works alone. They cannot share information or coordinate responses." Within weeks, pirate attacks increased by 300%. Merchant ships that had traveled safely for decades were now easy targets. Insurance companies raised their rates so high that many small traders could no longer afford coverage. Some routes became completely abandoned as the risk grew too great. Dr. Amanda Foster's research station in the Helix Nebula sat empty and dark. The facility had been humanity's greatest gift to galactic medicine, a place where all species could receive treatment and where breakthrough cures were developed through cooperation between different medical traditions. Amanda had spent years learning alien biology and teaching human medical techniques to doctors from dozens of worlds. Now, the station's advanced equipment collected dust. The alien doctors who had worked with Amanda tried to continue the research, but they could not operate the human-designed medical scanners or understand the complex treatment protocols she had developed. Dr. Kexmore from the Zentari Medical Institute stood in Amanda's empty laboratory, looking at machines he could not use. "She was so close to finding the cure for plague fever," he said to his assistant. "The research is all here, but it is written in human medical notation. Without her knowledge, we cannot continue the work." Similar scenes played out across the galaxy as human expertise vanished overnight. Space traffic control systems failed, because only humans had understood the complex coordination required to manage thousands of ships moving between hundreds of worlds. Agricultural advisors were gone, leaving alien farmers struggling with crop diseases they had never faced before. Engineering consultants who had maintained critical infrastructure on dozens of worlds were no longer available when systems broke down. The first interspecies war in 40 years began exactly as the humans might have predicted. Corvan military vessels moved into the Helios asteroid belt and ordered Zentari miners to leave immediately. The miners, confused and frightened, called for help from their government. But the Zentari had no military ships in the area and no diplomatic experience in handling such crises. General Voss commanded the Corvan assault force from his flagship. He had always resented human influence in his sector, believing that aliens should solve their own problems without outside interference. Now he had the chance to prove that the Corvans could handle territorial disputes without human mediators. "Zentari vessels, you have 1 hour to evacuate the asteroid belt," he broadcast to the mining platforms. "After that time, we will consider you hostile invaders and respond accordingly." The Zentari miners panicked. They had families living on the mining platforms and years of equipment that could not be moved quickly. They sent desperate messages to their government asking for protection, but the Zentari Republic had no warships near the belt and no experience in military negotiations. Zektar, now serving as the emergency coordinator for Zentari mining operations, tried to contact the Corvan government directly. But without human diplomatic protocols and translation services, his messages were ignored or misunderstood. The cultural differences that humans had always helped bridge became impossible barriers. When the hour deadline passed, Corvan warships opened fire on Zentari mining platforms. The miners fought back with whatever weapons they had, but they were no match for military vessels. 3 platforms were destroyed in the first attack, killing hundreds of families who had lived and worked in the asteroid belt for generations. The news of the attack spread quickly through galactic communication networks. Other species watched, in horror as 2 civilized peoples went to war over a dispute that human mediators had resolved peacefully many times before. But without humans to organize a peacekeeping response, no one knew how to stop the fighting. The galaxy was learning a hard lesson about the price of independence. For decades, they had relied on human skills and services while taking them for granted. Now, facing their first major crisis without human help, they discovered how much they had depended on their vanished friends. The cracks that appeared in the first 3 months would soon become breaks, and the breaks would become complete collapse. The galaxy had lost more than just one species when the humans left. They had lost the glue. 1 year after humanity vanished, the galaxy was burning. Admiral Rex Corvain stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching orbital bombardments turn 3 Corvan colonies into molten glass. The war that had started over mining rights in the Helios asteroid belt now covered 17 star systems and showed no signs of stopping. The Zentari had surprised everyone, including themselves, with their fierce resistance. What began as a simple territorial dispute had awakened something dark in both species. Without human peacekeepers to enforce ceasefires or negotiate truces, every battle escalated into total warfare. Surrender was no longer an option for either side. "Sir, the Zentari fleet is retreating to the outer planets," reported his tactical officer. "Should we pursue and finish them?" Rex nodded grimly. "Follow them. Leave no ships operational." The admiral had not wanted this war, but now that it had started, he intended to win it completely. The old rules about protecting civilians and limiting destruction had died with human oversight. Both sides now fought with a brutality that would have horrified the galaxy just 2 years earlier. On the planet below, millions of Corvan civilians had died in Zentari attacks the previous month. Rex told himself that his bombardment was justified revenge, but deep inside he knew the truth. Without humans to show them better ways to resolve conflicts, both species had reverted to the savage instincts their ancestors had used to conquer their home worlds. The economic collapse was equally devastating. Sarah Blake had managed the Central Trade Exchange from her office on Station Prime using complex algorithms to balance supply chains across the galaxy. Her computer systems had tracked the flow of goods between thousands of worlds, predicting shortages before they happened and rerouting shipments to prevent famines or economic crashes. Now those systems sat abandoned and useless. The aliens who tried to operate them could not understand the intricate mathematical formulas Sarah had developed over 15 years of experience. Currency values changed wildly from day to day as panic buying and desperate selling destroyed market stability. Director Kelmack of the Vegan Commercial Guild watched his people's economy crumble from his office overlooking the main trading floor. Before the humans left, the floor had buzzed with activity as traders from dozens of species bought and sold goods in an orderly fashion. Now it was chaos. "The Arcturus Republic is refusing to accept our currency," his assistant reported. "They say vegan credits are worthless because we cannot guarantee delivery of promised goods." "What about the Aldorian contracts for medical supplies?" Kelmack asked. "Cancelled. They found a cheaper supplier in the Rigel system, but those suppliers demand payment in Corvan military scrip. We cannot get Corvan scrip. They are at war and not trading with anyone." The conversation captured the new reality of galactic commerce. Without human coordination, trade had become a desperate scramble where each species looked out only for themselves. Long-term partnerships built over decades dissolved overnight as survival became more important than honor. Entire worlds faced starvation as supply chains collapsed. The planet Kepler-7 had specialized in manufacturing electronics for 50 years, importing all their food from agricultural worlds in exchange for their products. When the trade networks failed, they found themselves with warehouses full of computers, but no way to buy grain or vegetables. Governor Neltar of Kepler-7 sent desperate messages to nearby agricultural worlds, offering electronics at massive discounts in exchange for basic food supplies. But the farmers had their own problems and could not risk shipping food without guaranteed payment in stable currency. "Our people are starting to riot," Neltar told his council during an emergency meeting. "The food reserves will last maybe 2 more months. After that, we face mass starvation." "What about the emergency protocols?" asked his agricultural minister. "The humans established food security agreements for situations like this." "The humans are gone," Neltar replied bitterly. "Their agreements died with them. The breakdown of law enforcement was creating new dangers throughout civilized space." Detective Ryan Murphy had coordinated a joint task force that included officers from 23 different species. His team had tracked criminals across multiple star systems, sharing intelligence and resources to keep organized crime under control. Without human coordination, each species now policed only their own territory. Criminals quickly learned to operate across borders where no single law enforcement agency could follow them. Smuggling cartels that had been suppressed for years suddenly found new opportunities in the chaos. Captain Grixtor of the Crimson Fleet had expanded his pirate operations far beyond his wildest dreams. With no coordinated response from alien security forces, his ships attacked merchant vessels with complete impunity. Insurance companies had either gone bankrupt or raised their rates so high that most traders could no longer afford coverage. "The galaxy is ours for the taking," Grixtor told his captains during their monthly planning meeting. "Every species fights alone now. They cannot share information or coordinate defenses." His lieutenant, a scarred Vegan named Pexar, studied the shipping schedules they had stolen from undefended computer networks. "The medical supply run to the Centauri colonies will be carrying valuable drugs. No escort ships and minimal security." "Perfect." Grixtor smiled, showing sharp teeth. "Hit them hard and take everything. Leave no witnesses." The attack on the medical supply convoy was typical of the new piracy. Where human patrols had once forced pirates to operate carefully and avoid civilian casualties, now they struck with savage efficiency. 3 cargo ships carrying medicine to plague-stricken colonies were destroyed, their crews killed, and their cargo sold on black markets. Professor Katie Williams had been the galaxy's leading expert on ancient alien technologies. Her research into precursor artifacts had always followed strict safety protocols, ensuring that dangerous technologies were studied carefully rather than weaponized immediately. She had published papers on the ethical use of archaeological discoveries and trained a generation of alien scientists in responsible research methods. Without her guidance, newly discovered artifacts were being militarized without proper study. The Thek Consortium had found a piece of precursor technology on a dead world in the Outer Rim. Instead of following human research protocols, they immediately began trying to turn it into a weapon. Dr. Vex Kane, the Thek lead scientist, worked frantically to unlock the artifact's secrets. His people were losing badly in their border conflict with the Hegemony Alliance, and they needed any advantage they could find. "The energy readings are off the scale," his assistant reported. "This device could generate power equal to a star." "Excellent," Vexcon replied. "How quickly can we weaponize it?" "Unknown, sir. Professor Williams's safety protocols recommend years of careful study before attempting to activate precursor technology. We do not have years. Our colonies are being attacked. Daily, activate the device immediately." The Thek scientists ignored every safety warning Katie Williams had ever written. They had no choice. Without human mediation, their conflict with the hegemony had escalated into a war of extinction. Either they found a superweapon quickly, or their species would be wiped out completely. When they finally activated the precursor artifact, it worked beyond their expectations. The device could crack planets in half, turning entire worlds into asteroid fields. But it was also unstable and nearly impossible to control, exactly as human research had predicted. The Galactic Council itself was falling apart. Without human diplomats to bridge cultural gaps and find compromise solutions, old rivalries and prejudices resurfaced with deadly force. Species that had worked together for generations now viewed each other with suspicion and hatred. Chancellor Vextai tried desperately to hold the alliance together, but he lacked the diplomatic skills that humans had always provided. Every council session ended in arguments and threats. Representatives walked out of meetings or refused to attend at all. The Hegemony Alliance has withdrawn from the council, Vextai announced during what would be the last official session. They claim we are biased in favor of their enemies. The Rigel Federation left yesterday, added Director Thane. They say the council is powerless to stop the wars. What about the mutual defense treaties? Asked General Sekmore of the Aldorian military. Meaningless without human enforcement, Vextai replied sadly. Every species now looks out only for itself. The great alliance that had brought peace and prosperity to the galaxy for over a century dissolved in bitter recriminations. The council, building that had once hosted diplomatic triumphs, now sat empty except for maintenance staff and security guards. Refugee camps spread across the galaxy as displaced populations fled from war zones. Millions of beings who had lived peacefully for generations now found themselves homeless and desperate. The camps lacked adequate food, medical care, and security as each species struggled with problems too large for them to handle alone. On the border worlds, slave traders preyed on refugee populations that had no protection. Families were separated and sold to whoever could pay. Children disappeared into criminal networks that human law enforcement had once kept under strict control. The galaxy that humans had helped build was tearing itself apart. Every system they had created to promote. 2 years after the Great Silence began, Captain Vera Kane of the Aldorian Republic finally reached the edge of the Sol system. Her ship, the Seeker, had traveled for months to reach humanity's home, carrying representatives from 12 different species who all wanted the same thing: answers. The Sol system looked exactly as it always had. Earth hung in space like a blue jewel, with Mars and the other planets following their ancient orbits around the Sun. Human colonies on Mars and Europa showed signs of normal activity. Ships moved between the worlds in regular patterns. Everything appeared peaceful and ordinary. But something was wrong. A strange energy barrier surrounded the entire system, stretching far beyond the orbit of Pluto. The barrier was invisible to normal sensors, but completely solid to any ship that tried to pass through it. Even communication signals bounced harmlessly off its surface. "Try sending another message," Vera ordered her communications officer. "Use all frequencies." "Already tried, Captain," replied Lieutenant Hexmore, a young Aldorian with excellent technical skills. "The barrier reflects everything we send. Radio, laser, even quantum entanglement beams. Nothing gets through." Dr. Maya Patterson's signature was all over the barrier's construction. The human physicist had published papers on advanced energy manipulation that other species had barely understood. Now they were seeing her theories put into practice on a scale that seemed impossible. "This technology is beyond anything we know," said Professor Cheklan, the expedition's chief scientist. "The energy requirements alone should drain the power of entire star systems. How are the humans maintaining it?" Engineer Tom Bradley had clearly been involved in the barrier's design. His work on dimensional physics had always been centuries ahead of what other species could achieve. The barrier seemed to exist partially outside normal space, which explained why it was so effective at blocking all forms of contact. Vera ordered her ship to circle the barrier, looking for any weakness or opening. They spent weeks testing different approaches, but nothing worked. The humans had created the perfect isolation field, cutting themselves off completely from the rest of the galaxy. "Why would they do this?" asked Ambassador Nelkar of the Vegan Republic. "If they wanted to leave us alone, they could have simply stopped answering our calls. Why build this enormous barrier?" The question haunted everyone on the expedition. The barrier had clearly taken enormous resources and planning to construct. The humans must have been working on it for years, perhaps decades, before they finally used it. But why go to such extreme lengths to avoid contact? Back on their home, Worlds, the galaxy continued its downward spiral into chaos. The joint expedition had been organized as a last desperate hope for ending the wars and restoring some kind of order. Now that hope was fading as the barrier proved completely impenetrable. The search through abandoned human facilities had revealed disturbing evidence about humanity's final years in galactic society. Lieutenant Colonel Brad Stevens had left behind encrypted files in his military headquarters on Station Alpha 9. The expedition's code breakers had spent months trying to decrypt them before finally succeeding. The files contained detailed analyses of galactic political tensions dating back 15 years. Stevens had tracked every border dispute, trade disagreement, and cultural conflict in the galaxy. His reports painted a picture of growing instability that only human intervention was preventing from exploding into open warfare. "Look at this analysis of the Zentari-Corvin situation," Dr. Patterson said, studying Stevens's files in the abandoned station's computer core. He predicted their war 3 years before it started. Every escalation, every flashpoint, everything that actually happened. "The economic projections are even more accurate," added Chief Economist Rector of the Rigel Federation. Stevens calculated that galactic trade would collapse within 6 months of human withdrawal. He was off by only 2 weeks. The files revealed that humans had been watching the galaxy's growing dependency on their services with increasing alarm. They had tried repeatedly to encourage other species to develop their own diplomatic and economic management skills, but these efforts had always failed. Captain Helen Brooks's personal logs from the Frontier Patrol told a similar story. Her ship had been responsible for keeping peace along the dangerous border between the hegemony and the outer colonies. Her entries showed growing frustration with what she called galactic immaturity. "Another trade dispute today that could have been solved by children," one entry read. "The hegemony wants to charge higher fees for shipping through their territory. The colonies think this is unfair. Both sides immediately threaten military action instead of negotiating like civilized beings. Responded to distress call from Vegan merchant ship," another entry stated. "Pirates had damaged their engines and stolen their cargo. The ship's captain asked me why humans always have to solve everyone else's problems. I did not have a good answer." Helen's final entries suggested that she and other humans had begun to see their role in the galaxy as harmful rather than helpful. They were preventing other species from growing up and learning to handle their own problems. "We are like parents who never let their children face any challenges," her last entry read. "The galaxy has become dependent on us for everything. They cannot negotiate their own treaties, manage their own economies, or police their own territories. What happens when we are no longer here to help them?" The expedition found more evidence of humanity's secret planning in Dr. Lisa Morgan's research facility on the remote world of Kepler 442b. The xenosociologist had spent years studying how different species interacted with each other and with humans. Her final research project was codenamed Graduation. The files the expedition could access suggested that humanity had been planning their withdrawal for at least a decade. They had studied every possible outcome and prepared for the chaos that would follow their departure. Graduation appears to be based on the theory that species must learn independence through experience. Dr. Morgan's assistant, a Zentari named Kexral, explained to the expedition team. Dr. Morgan believed that our civilization had become too dependent on human management. "But surely they knew that people would die," protested Captain Kane. "The wars, the economic collapse, the breakdown of law enforcement, they must have predicted all of this." "They did," Kexarel replied sadly. Dr. Morgan's models predicted everything that has happened. The duration of the wars, the number of casualties, even which species would suffer the most. They knew exactly what the cost would be. The discovery was shocking. The humans had not abandoned the galaxy in anger or fear. They had carefully planned their withdrawal as what they believed was necessary medicine for an unhealthy civilization. They had accepted that millions would die in the short term to prevent what they saw as an even greater catastrophe in the future. Colonel Frank Miller's strategic analysis, found in a hidden vault beneath the human embassy on New Geneva, revealed the full scope of their planning. His projections showed that without human intervention, the galaxy would eventually face a war that would destroy all sentient life within 50 years. The species of the galaxy have never learned to truly cooperate, Miller's analysis concluded. They work together only when humans force them to do so. Their natural instincts toward tribalism and territorial expansion will eventually lead to a conflict that consumes everything. The only hope for long-term survival is to force rapid evolution of diplomatic and cooperative skills through crisis. Short-term casualties, however severe, are preferable to total extinction. The expedition members read these files with growing horror and understanding. The humans had not been cruel or heartless. They had made the most difficult decision in galactic history, choosing to let their friends suffer in the hope that the suffering would teach them to survive without help. But as the expedition prepared to return home with their terrible news, they discovered one final piece of evidence that changed everything. Hidden in the deepest levels of the human research station was a real-time monitoring system that had been tracking the galaxy's collapse with perfect accuracy. The humans knew exactly what was happening. They were watching every battle, every economic crash, every breakdown in civilization. They had the power to end the suffering at any time by simply lowering their barrier and resuming their old roles. Instead, they remained silent and isolated, letting the galaxy burn while they waited to see if their desperate gamble would succeed. The expedition realized that the humans were not gone, but were watching and waiting for signs that their former friends had finally learned to stand on their own. The question was whether the galaxy would learn fast enough to survive the lesson, or whether the price of independence would prove too high for any civilization to pay. 5 years had passed since humanity vanished behind their mysterious barrier, and the galaxy was a graveyard of broken dreams and shattered civilizations. The great cities that had once bustled with trade between dozens of species now lay in ruins. Entire star systems had been reduced to radioactive wastelands where nothing could live for thousands of years. President Nicole Carter stood in the observation deck of the hidden monitoring station on the dark side of Earth's moon, watching the real-time feeds from across the galaxy. The screens showed scenes of devastation that would have been unimaginable just 6 years earlier. Refugee camps stretched across dead worlds. Starving children of a dozen species begged for food that would never come. Warships drifted powerless through space, their crews long dead from battles that solved nothing. The Zentari-Corvin War finally ended yesterday, reported Dr. Lisa Morgan, her voice hollow with exhaustion. Both species have fought themselves into extinction. The survivors number fewer than 10,000 on each side. What about the Thek Consortium? Nicole asked, though she already knew the answer would be bad. Their planet-cracking weapon malfunctioned during the Battle of Rigel Prime, Dr. Morgan replied. The entire system is gone. 12 billion beings died in the explosion, including most of the Thek population. Nicole closed her eyes and tried not to think about the faces behind those numbers. She had known many of those people personally. Ambassador Kekral of the Thek had been a friend for 20 years. His children had played with human children on diplomatic stations. Now they were all dead because humanity had chosen to let the galaxy learn independence the hard way. The economic collapse is complete, added Colonel Frank Miller, reading from his latest analysis. Interstellar trade has dropped to less than 5% of pre-withdrawal levels. Most worlds have reverted to subsistence farming and local manufacturing. The great age of galactic civilization is over. The monitoring station had tracked every stage of the collapse with scientific precision. The humans had known exactly what would happen when they withdrew their stabilizing influence. But the reality was worse than even their most pessimistic projections. They had hoped that the galaxy's species would learn to cooperate out of desperation, but instead they had fought each other into near extinction. Captain Jack Morrison, now serving as the station's military coordinator, studied the tactical displays, showing the remnants of various fleets. Piracy is actually decreasing, he reported, not because law enforcement has improved, but because there's almost nothing left worth stealing. The Crimson Fleet that had terrorized merchant shipping for 3 years had finally collapsed when their target ships stopped traveling. Captain Grixtor and his pirates had been reduced to scavenging wreckage from battlefields, fighting over the scraps of a civilization they had helped destroy. "What about the refugee situations?" Nicole asked, dreading the answer. "Stable, but only because most of the refugees are dead," Dr. Morgan replied bluntly. "The camps lacked adequate supplies, medical care, and security. Disease and starvation killed millions. The survivors have either found new homes or given up trying." The human leadership had debated ending their isolation hundreds of times over the past 5 years. Every day brought new reports of suffering that they could have prevented with a single message. Their ships could have resumed patrols in hours. Their diplomats could have negotiated ceasefires in days. Their economic coordinators could have restored trade in weeks. But they had committed to seeing their experiment through to its conclusion. The galaxy would either learn to survive without human help, or it would serve as a warning to future civilizations about the dangers of dependency. The galactic population has decreased by 67% since our withdrawal, Dr. Morgan continued. Most worlds that depended on interstellar trade for survival are now uninhabitable. The remaining populations live in isolated communities with little contact between systems. Nicole turned away from the monitors showing dead worlds and empty space lanes. She had been president when the decision was made to withdraw from galactic society. The responsibility for every death, every destroyed city, every broken family rested on her shoulders. "There is some positive news," Colonel Miller said carefully. "The few surviving governments are showing signs of learning to cooperate without human mediation." "Tell me," Nicole said, grasping for any hope in the darkness. "The Eldorian Republic and the Vegan Alliance have formed a mutual aid pact," Miller explained. "They're sharing resources and coordinating defense without any outside help. It's primitive compared to what they had before, but it's genuine cooperation. The surviving Zentari and Corvan populations have agreed to share the remaining habitable worlds in their former territories," Dr. Morgan added. "They've realized that continued fighting would mean complete extinction for both species. These small signs of progress were overshadowed by the enormous cost of achieving them. The galaxy had learned to cooperate, but only after most of its population had died and its civilization had collapsed. The lesson had been taught, but the price was almost too high to contemplate." "There's something else," Dr. Morgan said hesitantly. "We've been receiving messages." "What kind of messages?" Nicole asked. "From the survivors. They're not asking for help or demanding explanations. They're just talking to us, telling us about their lives, their hopes, their attempts to rebuild." Dr. Morgan activated a communication panel, and voices filled the observation deck. An elderly Zentari farmer spoke about teaching his grandchildren how to grow food without advanced technology. A young vegan engineer described her efforts to repair damaged water purification systems using only local materials. A Corvan teacher talked about establishing schools in refugee settlements. "They know we can hear them," Dr. Morgan explained. "Our monitoring systems aren't secret. They figured out that we've been watching all along." "Are they angry with us?" Nicole asked. "Some are, but most seem to understand why we left. They're not asking us to come back and solve their problems. They're just sharing their progress. Nicole listened to the voices of the survivors and felt something she hadn't experienced in 5 years. Pride mixed with her grief. The galaxy was broken, but the pieces that remained were stronger than they had ever been. The species that had survived were learning to stand on their own, to solve their own problems, to help each other without human guidance. "It's time," she said finally. Colonel Miller nodded. He had been expecting this decision for months. "Are we resuming full contact?" "No," Nicole replied. "We're going to do something different." She activated the communication system that had been silent for 5 years. Her message would reach every surviving settlement in the galaxy simultaneously, transmitted through relay stations that had continued operating automatically throughout the withdrawal. "People of the galaxy," Nicole began, her voice carrying, across the darkness of space to the scattered survivors of a broken civilization. "This is President Nicole Carter of Earth." The response was immediate. Communication channels that had been dark for years suddenly came alive with voices calling out in dozens of languages. But Nicole continued speaking, and gradually the voices quieted as beings across the galaxy stopped to listen. "We did not abandon you," she said. "We withdrew because we believed you had become too dependent on us. We hoped that facing challenges alone would help you grow stronger and more self-reliant." She paused, thinking of all the faces she would never see again. All the friends who had died while humanity watched from behind their barrier. "The cost of this lesson was higher than we ever imagined," she continued. "We take full responsibility for every life lost, every world destroyed, every dream shattered. We cannot undo the suffering we caused by our withdrawal, but we have watched you rebuild. We have seen you learn to cooperate, to share resources, to solve problems without our help. You have proven that you can survive and even thrive on your own." Nicole took a deep breath before making the announcement that would change everything once again. "The barrier around our system will be lowered tomorrow. Our ships will resume limited patrols to protect against pirates and natural disasters. Our medical teams will offer assistance to worlds facing plague or famine, but we will not return to managing your governments, your economies, or your diplomatic relations. The galaxy belongs to you now. We are here to help when you ask for help, but the decisions are yours to make. The civilization you build from now on will be your own creation, not ours." She ended the transmission and stood quietly in the observation deck, listening to the flood of responses from across the galaxy. Some voices were angry, demanding explanations and reparations. Others were grateful, thanking humanity for the painful lesson in independence. Most were simply relieved that the long silence was finally over. The experiment was finished. The galaxy had paid for its education in the currency of billions of lives, and the survivors had earned the right to shape their own future. Humanity would be there to help when needed, but they would never again allow any civilization to become so dependent that it could not survive without them. The price of silence had been higher than anyone could have imagined, but the galaxy that emerged from the ashes would be stronger than the one that had collapsed. The species that survive